6010.
Hello and welcome into Fantasy Focus Football presented by Wingstop. My name is Daniel Dopp here with Stephania Bell and Field Yates. We got a huge Tuesday show planned for you today. No falling panels from the sky for us, my friends. It is going to be a normal Tuesday show. Recapping Monday Night Football, diving into the waiver wire. We got a new segment that Stephania brought to the table I'm really excited about called Good Vibes, to be able to get some positivity heading into your life just in case your fantasy team is not giving you all of that so far this year. But guys, let's start. First and foremost, with Monday Night Football.
Go.
Texans and Cowboys, the battle of Texas right now. I want to say this. Joe Mixon did his best Taysom Hill impression, finding the end zone 3 times.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. 100 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns, a couple of receptions. We talk about angry runners in the NFL sometimes. Joe Mixon's an angry runner.
You want to start?
No, I'll let you start.
Joe Mixon is Derrick Henry without missing time this year.
That's fair.
That's what he is. I mean, that's what he has been. When he has been healthy, he's been every bit the player that Derrick Henry has been this season. He's just missed whatever it was, 2 or 3 games because of an ankle injury. That's how I look at him right now. And Joe Mixon probably has a little bit more upside in the passing game than Derrick Henry, but the secret sauce of Derrick Henry forever has been elite volume, elite rushing upside, and elite touchdown opportunities. Joe Mixon has every single one of those with slightly more passing game opportunities as well. It is incredible. I did not have on my bingo card this year that the Texans offense would run through Joe Mixon in a wide receiver room that featured Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell and C.J. Stroud once again busting last night. But Joe Mixon is the Texans offense, and as far as rest of season running back rankings are concerned, we can go back and forth on the RB1, but he's on the short list right now. It's him, it's Derrick Henry, it's Saquon Barkley, it's Alvin Kamara, it's Christian McCaffrey perhaps if he gets going a little bit more. That's how good Joe Mixon has been this year.
It's unbelievable. It is like the rebirth of Joe Mixon in a different city.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting if you watched Scott Van Pelt talking to him last night, because Mixon clearly deserved the post-game interview. And just asking him about feeling rejuvenated being in Houston. 500-yard rushing games and a touchdown on the road. He jumped to the front of the line of our running back fantasy scoring leaders yesterday with 35.3 fantasy points. I got Saquon. I think I referred to that.
Yep.
I got Saquon by Field in a different league of ours that we'll talk about later this week. He got Mixoned by my team this week. So
nice.
We did trade fantasy
Trading
points.
blows.
But I think the thing about Joe Mixon is he made it clear he's not done. Like, he feels good at this point in the season. The game is going to go through him for the Texans.
He looks great. I know we've said this a couple times. It's so weird. Yeah, like seeing him in Cincinnati, and I hate to say this for all the Bengals fans that are out there, especially our producer Tyler, who
Tyler would agree with this.
He would. Joe Mixon just looks better this year. There's more pop in his step. There's a little bit more grit in his game. I don't know what to say.
Better all the way around.
It feels like he's just a different running back.
Forever. Maybe not forever, but for a handful of years there in Cincinnati, it was like, Joe Mixon, here's what you're signing up for. Elite volume.
On a volume.
Terrible efficiency, and the occasional 50-point game, right? Now you're getting elite volume, crazy efficiency, and maybe no 50-point games yet, but he's still got 7 weeks left to do that. And on top of that, he's getting you like 25 every single week. It's insane to me how good he has been. Usually, running backs do not age as gracefully as Joe Mixon has, so it has been yet another veteran running back stating his case. And
I feel vindicated, by the way, because I just feel like all these veteran running backs are proving my point that
love
you
to see
can't
it.
write them off. And he actually looks like a younger guy with fresher legs and clearly is happy in his new spot.
let's go through the rest of this.
I was a little frustrated because on that very first drive, Joe Mixon ended up getting a touchdown that I think should have gone to my guy, Nico Collins. No big deal,
right?
It was just a 14.5-point play that was wiped away on the very
More
first
than
play
that,
of the
right?
game.
Wasn't it? Oh, sorry, it was 75 yards. 77 yards.
77 yards.
It would have been
I was
14.7
watching carefully.
points.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's fantasy heartbreak right there.
So, Nico, but what's wild about that, too, is that if you didn't watch the game, you'd say to yourself, like, wow, Nico Collins, only 4 catches for 54 yards. Like, kind of a modest night. It is a modest night by him. Yes. Except for the fact that it could have easily been whatever
double, at least.
9.4 is plus 17.7. Obviously, Nico's going to be great most weeks. Last night, no surprise. They were more judicious with him than they have been in prior games.
I actually would be really interested to talk to Nico Collins about what happened because I watched him on that run and I thought he's slowing up a little bit. He just didn't seem like it wasn't like full stride. And luckily, he was winning that battle to get to the end zone. Obviously, the play got negated. But after that, he was out for a bit.
Yeah.
And I wondered if there was a little something that he felt. That's his first big explosive run since he's been out with the hamstring injury. And I just wondered if there was something on that run that made him hold back a little bit. Don't be surprised if they limit him this week during practice because after that, it did change.
I was hoping he just needed oxygen and it wasn't like a hamstring because it was like first play of the game, run full speed the entire length of the field. Nico, oh, by the way, that doesn't count. That would make me at least feel a little bit of heartbreak as someone that needed a big night from Nico Collins. Like that would have gone a long way for me. So.
But I would say, obviously if you needed a monster night from Nico to get that victory like Daniel did, then you're disappointed. If you're trying to find the positive side going forward here, you've got Nico, who I think showed on that very first catch that assuming there isn't an injury, a setback that's going to keep him out of next week's game, you should feel confident about Nico being a top 10 wide receiver the rest of the way, the big play upside, the clear focus of the passing game. If the passing game even exists, guys, I really didn't think that C.J. Stroud had this elite upside coming into the season. We talked about that all preseason. And for an incredible player, he didn't have incredible fantasy upside, right? In large part because while he's a very gifted pocket passer, he's a good runner. They just don't use him as a runner. Well, now he is not running still. He had 26 yards last night, which is actually not bad for C.J. Stroud. But he had an interception and 0 passing touchdowns. Once again, like this has been way too common of a theme this year for C.J. Stroud. I was over this morning in a different part of campus talking to some colleagues, and one of them said, hey, by the way, I want to let you know I dropped C.J. Stroud this morning, just like I had to do it. Like that's the point that he has gotten to. I think not just like not starting him, but like people are saying, I might just drop him for somebody else that I can actually use at a different position.
I think that's okay. Honestly, when you look at it, he feels like, and I don't want to be negative. We'll get into our good vibe segment a little bit later, but like
objective.
He looks like the sophomore version of Caleb Williams, where to me it was like, not the way that he's playing, but he came into this situation where it was like we were saying Caleb's got these 3 great wide receivers. Man, it's going to be great for his value. Even if C.J. Stroud doesn't run, he's got 3 awesome dudes in Tank and Nico and Stephon Diggs. And then still, I mean, I understand we lost Stephon Diggs, but it's you expected more from a guy that was such a good passer in his rookie season. And now he's got a running back that's doing things too. I think that'd make it easier for him to find windows.
Well, I will say the passing game to Joe Mixon benefits a little bit from that of him. That's who he's looking for when he needs to get out of a situation. And the other thing is he did take off for a little run yesterday, and I thought, are we seeing something different? Are we going to start seeing some rushing yards from C.J. Stroud? I don't think that's here to stay. I think that was just a one-time.
Just like sight unseen, if I were to ask you where C.J. Stroud kind of categorizes amongst quarterbacks right now, definitely not a lock-it-in starter.
Nope.
And I'm not even sure he's a streaming option. He is like a low-end quarterback 2 right now.
We are in a dynasty league together in which Stephania just shellacked me this week for what it's worth. However, it's a super flex league, and I played C.J. Stroud. I wish that I had played Jordan Love. I've got Bo Nix, Jordan Love, and C.J. Stroud, and I feel like C.J. Stroud is going to be the guy on the bench for the rest of the season with how the other 2 guys are playing.
Honestly, if I were you, I would like my deferral would always be like my
Bo Nix.
Would be Bo starts.
Yes.
Yep. Jordan Love is in your super flex, and C.J. Stroud is on the outside looking in.
Yep.
And I'll live with the consequences if there are some for making that decision.
Yeah, which is really tough. Hey, let's talk about consequences of some decisions here. The Cowboys, in spite of going all in.
We don't have to talk about that.
It's difficult. All right, so let's talk about the one player that matters. One player that matters here.
Yeah, but
is CeeDee Lamb.
That's it. Volume, and what was the thought process?
Say, you don't want Kevontae Turpin 17.6.
You know what? He looked great. I mean, I think I saw Next Gen said he hit the fastest speed so far this year.
I mean, so that was an unexpected surprise. I do want to mention Jake Ferguson was out early in the concussion protocol, so just something to be aware of if he's your tight end.
Yeah, the Cowboys are an absolute joke. There is not a single player on this roster, not named CeeDee Lamb, that you have any real desire to start. I mean, you might have to start Rico Dowdle because of the fact that he plays running back, and I'm not trying to rain on the parade here, Stephania, but like even Brandon Aubrey with the terrible offense.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, the guy he did miss a field goal last night, which is
he slipped on
Bill
that
Belichick.
one. So at least I feel better in the fact that he did slip, and that was why he missed, as opposed to it being like all of a sudden what's happened to Brandon.
But and my bigger concern is like he'll make almost every kick. It's that like they never get
He
down
won't have
there
the
anymore.
opportunity. He won't have the opportunity.
You know, for a guy that we thought could be the most valuable kicker in fantasy football, like Chris Boswell, is like, I will take that mantle and run with it very happily here. So CeeDee Lamb is going to thrive off of volume. Still, such a talented player. But man alive, that team is terrible. They're awful. They're not fun to watch whatsoever. And good luck. Next Thursday, we get them against Tommy DeVito.
Oh, my God.
I know. I saw.
It's crazy to think that CeeDee Lamb has become one of those players that, like, you put him in your lineup and don't watch the game because you're not going to feel better if you watch CeeDee Lamb.
Who would have thought CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill that we're asking ourselves?
Oh, my gosh.
How about this?
Fantasy
Over
karma.
under 1.5 touchdown score the rest of the season for CeeDee Lamb. 7 games left. Over under 1.5.
I would go over.
Gosh.
I would go over.
Right?
I don't know, but the fact that we're having a hard time deciding.
It doesn't feel
That's
great with
the
Cooper
issue.
Rush when you've watched it. It
Yep.
did not feel good.
Agreed.
All right, when we come back, we're going to dive into our Answering the Bell segment, talk about some injury updates as well as a quick benching. We'll see you guys in just a moment. ESPN Bet Live returns on Friday and has everything that you need to know before betting this week's NFL slate. Aaron, Joe, and Tyler return on Friday and will be on throughout the weekend with all the picks, props, and parlays you need. Check out ESPN Bet Live. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football alongside Field Yates and Stephania Bell. My name is Daniel Dopp, and Mike Clay has been benched on this Tuesday show, similar to the way that Daniel Jones, unfortunately, is going to be benched for Tommy DeVito. Tommy Cutlets.
Our Giants friends would not agree that that's a negative. That's a positive.
It is. It does seem like
And Daniel Jones now quarterback 3. So to be clear, this
behind
is,
Drew Lock. It's like he's benched.
This is a
This
move.
is Robert Griffin III during the 5th year of his rookie contract. They're not going to risk the possibility of him getting hurt and them owing him $23 million. You will not see Daniel Jones on the Giants field again this season, absent completely unforeseen circumstances like multiple injuries to other players. It's a Tommy DeVito show right now. This is a team that is desperate for any sort of surcharge they can get, any kind of just boost to the offense they could get. And I am not entirely sure they're going to get a massive boost, but I'll tell you what, people have already asked, like, does this help or hurt Malik Neighbors? What's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results? I can't tell you confidently that Tommy DeVito is going to be better than Daniel Jones for Malik Neighbors, but I'm not sure it can get a whole lot worse. They're not going to change the play calling. They're not going to stop designing plays for Malik Neighbors, right? So if the targets go down, we don't have a quarterback problem. We've got a scheme problem.
Yeah.
That ain't going to be the problem. The problem, if there is one, is that Tommy DeVito is either a nominal or a non-upgrade over Danny Dimes, and the same concerns that we've had for about 5 weeks now continue going forward. I talked about this after the Giants' last game. So this was 2 Tuesdays ago, right, or 2 Mondays ago. Malik Neighbors is who we thought he might be in the preseason. Tons of volume. That's great, right? You like tons of opportunities. Bad quarterback play.
Yeah.
What does bad quarterback play lead to? 2 things. 1, lower catch percentage. So you might get 11 targets, you might catch 5 of them.
Yep.
2, how many end zone targets is he going to get the rest of the season, Malik Neighbors?
Seems like few.
Now that would be a good board bet right there. I don't know who's on which side. More touchdown score the rest of the way. Malik Neighbors
CeeDee Lamb.
or CeeDee Lamb?
I don't like that. I don't like this. I don't want to put it in the either. I kind of feel like I'd probably take Malik Neighbors over CeeDee Lamb.
I probably would too, which is weird. I don't even feel good about saying it, but I only because I think, okay, what is most likely to happen? They're going to throw up those balls for Malik Neighbors to get, and he's going to get the explosive play touchdown. And maybe if he has a couple games where he gets a massive number of touchdowns, he ends up on the right side of that board bet. Because I think it's more likely to be that than like week in and week out consistency.
That reminds me of like me going through like some of my flex options in my deep leagues where I'm like, honestly, like I low-key could see Deontay Johnson outscoring Mike Williams this week. Well, they both go for 0, and you're like, oh, wait.
Oh, that's not great.
The failure was the question in it.
Yes, exactly. I took a quick look really quickly at last year's wide receiver play for the Giants with Tommy DeVito under center. The best games that I could find. Week 11, Darius Slayton, 4 for 82 and a touchdown. Week 12, Jalen Hyatt had 5 for 109, so at least we had a 100-yard game there. Week 14, Wan'Dale Robinson had 6 for 79. These aren't any huge games. This is like as good as it got. Week 15, Darius Slayton had 8 targets. That was the most by any wide receiver with Tommy DeVito under center. 8 targets was the most that any wide receiver saw. Part of that, though, is tough. And you mentioned this field, and then we can move on. It's tough because last year's team, if they were on the field for 60 plays, it felt like 55 of them were going to Saquon Barkley. Like they were trying not to give the ball, let Tommy DeVito do that. So it's a little bit tough to quantify what's this offense going to look like with Tommy DeVito when last year, when it was under Tommy DeVito, they relied on Saquon so heavily as a part of that.
50% Tyrone Tracy, 50% Malik Neighbors will all be good.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just between those two guys. So it's kind of like a wait and see as to how this is going to do, but I don't think it's going to get, it doesn't seem like it can get much worse for Malik Neighbors. We'll see if Tommy DeVito can maybe bring a little bit more fantasy upside to some of these Giants. All right, Stephania, let's talk about a handful of injuries here that we need to know about before we talk about the waiver wire, a little answering the bell, if you may. Where do you want to start?
Let's start with Darnell Mooney, because that was a new one this week. Darnell Mooney, who's been a lovely surprise for most of us in fantasy football.
Absolutely.
I mean, he has just been one of the most consistent players, really kind of matching Drake London, in some cases exceeding his performance week in, week out. Leaves with a hamstring injury, only played about 50% of the offensive snaps this weekend. Not viewed as a serious hamstring injury, so that's encouraging. We'll see. They have a bye this week, so that actually comes at the perfect time for them. And the hope is that he'll be back in week 13.
Okay. Love to see that. Knowing that, I mean, I kind of feel like we don't even need to talk about the other pass catchers until we get past next week to see if that's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, for some reason,
something to have on your radar, so you make sure you have somebody just in case.
Love that.
Some Ray McLeod, you know.
All right, Stephania, let's stick in that. Do you mind staying with the wide receiver conversation here? I think we potentially have another wide receiver coming back.
I know. How about Mike Evans coming back into your lineup? You would love to see that, right?
Yes.
Mike Evans hinted before their bye week that he could be back as soon as the week after the bye, and it looks like that's the case. You know, teams do get the bonus practice typically coming out of a bye week. So on Monday, Mike Evans was on the practice field. You love to see it that early. And I would feel very encouraged about his chances for coming back to rejoin your lineup this week.
Would love to see that. I mean, if he comes back and he's here this week, Field, I think I ranked him inside my top 10 already, given
It's a great matchup against the Giants. Obviously, this Buccaneers team is desperate for wide receiver player right now. And on top of that, in a week in which we do have 6 teams on a bye, including the likes of, Josh Allen, big boost for Baker Mayfield, who he had been probably a starter no matter what anyways, but it only fortifies Baker Mayfield's likely standing as a top 10 quarterback option this week with a couple of the very best quarterbacks not available.
Yeah, Josh Allen and Joe Burrow both on bye this week, so definitely moving up the list a little bit. Stephania.
Notice you didn't mention the Jets, the Saints.
Well, I didn't. Yeah, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Mac Jones. We'll see about Trevor Lawrence with this Jaguars team. We'll talk about them maybe next week and see who their quarterback is going to be.
Their coach might be.
There's maybe a lot of changes there in Jacksonville. We'll see how that works.
Good time to have a week off from the Jags.
Speaking of some changes, Stephania, are we going to see a change, do you think, in this Carolina Panthers running back room?
Well, I think you're going to see a little teeny addition because you're going to see the debut of Jonathan Brooks, I believe, this week. You're going to get Jonathan Brooks to take the field. This is how it's shaping up. Jonathan Brooks, obviously drafted by the Panthers out of Texas, tore his ACL last year, and hasn't yet to see any NFL game action, but he has been kind of progressively working towards that way. They don't need to do much. They have Chuba Hubbard, who's been fantastic for them. Yes. And they have consistently stated, and I would like to, acknowledge that they have been true to this and that they have not pushed Jonathan Brooks too quickly. But I do think it's time to start dipping his toe into the pool of NFL game action. That really is the last phase of rehab. And it's harder when you're new to the NFL because you're not only getting comfortable with getting hit, you're now getting hit by NFL players. So it's important to get some snaps, but I'm not looking at him for fantasy purposes by any means.
It seemed like it was just going to be a two-headed committee there, too, because it sounds like Miles Sanders is not going to play in this one. I'm not sure what the expectations is for him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, but
they've got
I could see somebody else. There could be somebody, whether it's Raheem Blackshear or somebody else, who plays a role. So there were a lot of people that were unhappy with the Panthers' decision to pay Chuba Hubbard. They thought, hey, why are you reinvesting in a player who is going to, sort of clog the lane for Jonathan Brooks? Well, the only thing that would be sillier than that would be to reinvest in Chuba Hubbard and then defer to Jonathan Brooks almost exactly 12 months off a torn ACL and not play Chuba Hubbard a ton down the stretch. So I have minimal expectations for Jonathan Brooks, absent a Chuba Hubbard injury, which we certainly don't want to see happen. I fully expect it'll be the Chuba show this weekend against the Chiefs. Terrible matchup, still going to be started, but obviously the Chiefs have been as stingy of a run defense basically all season. I know James Cook found the end zone twice last week. Did not pile up a ton of yards, though, in that game against KC.
Yeah, honestly, it feels like we're trying to see a handful of teams kind of go this route by having two legitimate running back situations there. And I think in Carolina, if you're telling me that you've got two good running backs that you can lean on while Bryce Young continues to be able to learn and kind of get, what's the right phrase? Not get his feet underneath him, but get like his, I mean, you just want him to be able to feel like a little bit more confident with what's going on, like maybe not have him throw the ball 45 times a game, rely on your running game a little bit. I don't see any problem with that.
And I think the Panthers' mindset right now, I don't know this, but I think the Panthers' mindset down the stretch here is let's continue to evaluate Bryce just in case. If he catches lightning in a bottle, then we might not be in the quarterback business this offseason.
Yeah.
You also are playing him to prove that, hey, even if he's not the guy for us, maybe there's enough decent tape this offseason that somebody else might say, wasn't perfect, but let's bring him into the fold, make him our number 2, and see if we, meaning the acquiring team, can't create a little bit of this second act magic that we have seen with the likes of Geno Smith and Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield and other former top picks or highly drafted quarterbacks that just needed some time to reach their full potential.
I was literally the 3 names that I was going to mention. I feel like they've given a lot of confidence to potential quarterbacks that maybe did not start out the way that teams wanted, but being able to see, hey, there might be a revitalization project here, and we have some options.
Agree. Yep.
All right. When we come back, we're going to dive into the waiver wire, let you know who you should be picking up heading into your Week 12 matchups. We'll see you guys in just a moment. Fantasy Football Now. You know what it is. Remember to tune into Fantasy Football Now on Sundays and join me, Mike Clay, Field Yates, Stephania Bell, Damian Woody, our friend Eric Moody, and Liz Loza as we get you ready for Week 12 of the fantasy season. From injuries to rankings, we have got you covered on that show. Find us on ESPN2 this Sunday, starting at 10 a.m. Eastern, all the way up until kickoff. Back here on Fantasy Focus Football, my name is Daniel Dopp, here with Stephania Bell and Field Yates. Let's dive into the Week 12 waiver wire. Field, we mentioned this. We've said it a couple times. The deeper we get into the season, the deeper we get into the fantasy season, the rougher it usually looks on the waiver wire. Hopefully you need a tight end this week because we might have a couple options for you.
Before we get to that, because you're right, the waiver wire stinks this week.
It doesn't feel great.
It stinks. But I got to get something off my chest here. And I think you guys might agree with me, but I don't want to put words into your mouth. So once I say my piece, you guys can do it.
All right, deal.
The dumbest thing the NFL has done this year is stack 12 teams on a bye over the final 3 weeks of byes this season.
Totally.
Oh, by the way, so we have 6 teams. Get this, 6 teams are on a bye this week. We told you, you've got no Josh Allen, you've got no Joe Burrow amongst the quarterbacks. Think about the wide receivers we're not going to have this week. No Jamar Chase. Is he the highest scoring wide receiver in all fantasy football this week?
I believe that he is,
yep. Yeah, he is, by a lot. That's going to be a hard guy to replace. You mentioned the Jaguars. You mentioned the Bengals, the Bills,
Jets. No Garrett Wilson, no Devontae Adams.
All those guys, right?
Yep.
So these guys aren't available. But then next week, everybody plays. And then the following week, week 14, 6 teams on a bye. Again, it's the single dumbest thing the NFL has done this year. I have said this many, many times before. Make bye weeks more evenly distributed. Whether you want to do 8 weeks with 4 teams on a bye, or whether maybe you want to do whatever it is, 4 weeks with 5 teams on a bye and 2 weeks with 6 teams on a bye. That's fine. But what they are doing, chemically imbalancing it towards the end of the block of bye weeks, is so dumb. I understand the NFL will tell you, hey, our business is not driven by fantasy football, but we are all a testament to this. You know what, Stephania? I understand they're very healthy, but if they were smart, they would say there is a massive number of people who are sitting there sweating out Monday Night Football last night, saying to themselves, I don't give a crap about the Cowboys or their terrible stadium or the Texans and their non-existent passing game. If I can just get X number of points from Joe Mixon, I'll be a happy clam. That's all I need. And instead, week 14, and I get it, every team gets just one bye. So if you didn't have them in week 14, you didn't have them weeks 1 through 13. But as we all know, as you get later in the season, the stakes are that much higher. I just think it is a complete blind spot by the NFL, so it's got me a little riled up this week.
Yes, well, I know you've been consistent on this rant, and I applaud you for that. I do think, for me, the problem is that those really early bye weeks, like it's that is like, who wants a bye in week 4?
Nobody wants that, so I agree.
I would rather shift it, and as painful as it is here, I think that week 14 is a real problem.
I think
with 6 teams there.
Yep.
But to your point, make it more evenly distributed and shove the week 4 down to week 5 or even week 6.
You ready?
Would say.
Week 7 through 12. 7, that's like not quite halfway through the season, but it's enough. I mean, if you've been going since, mid-July, week 7, that's like a long stretch right there.
Yep.
And by the way, what you do on top of that is so if you have an early bye week, like some of these teams will, if you have this week 7 through 12, where you go for 4 weeks you got 5, and then for 2 weeks you got 6. The teams that have early buys, they play a Thursday game later in the season, so they get their mini bye. If you have a week 12 bye, the final week, maybe you're playing on Thursday Night Football in week 3, in week 4. So again, you are getting breaks somewhere during the season. I just think it's a massive blind spot. I've ranted for too long. It's stupid by the NFL, and I feel bad for everybody out there, including myself, who's sitting there, choosing between 2 retired wide receivers for my flex spot this weekend.
Field Yates available for consultation.
That's right,
I have
for the
his
schedule.
If anyone's interested.
I totally co-sign.
But also, I know that also there's the Europe games that are factored, the international, I should say, because it's beyond Europe now. And with those being added, usually teams go into a bye week. But I think there is there's some flux in that, because there was a team that did
a lot of teams are choosing
not
against the bye
to
week.
have
I think
their bye afterwards.
Jets decided not to have a bye after.
Right, so if they're able to,
Jets, Patriots,
they're able to
Jaguars.
verbalize that, which means that it is a possibility, it's not required, then I don't see why we can't.
I want to put a bow on this, and then we can actually talk about some players. However, this is how weak the waiver wire is, that we can do this rant before we get into it.
The waiver wire is the way it is, actually.
I want to say this. Field, I completely co-sign with you on that, because unless you are a Texans or Cowboys fan, and if you're a Cowboys fan, you checked out halfway through that Monday Night Football game, but it's us fantasy players that need those 4 extra points from this guy that stays up watching that Monday Night Football game all the way until the end to be able to see it. Like, fantasy people are the ones that can tell you the wide receiver 4 on these rosters, because we're so deep into it, because we love this game so much. So I am totally with you.
Yeah.
Fantasy football matters so much more. Stop giving us week 14 buys. Just don't do it. Just don't do it.
And for those that are wondering, let's just talk. Let's just walk away.
Let's dive in. Let's dive in. We talked about a guy yesterday that was one of the best tight end situations that we have ever seen in the history of the NFL. Stephania, you laid it out. Taysom Hill was absolutely legitimate yet last week. This week, only rostered in 46% of leagues. Feels like if you need a tight end in this week in a Saints offense that is devoid of other options, Taysom Hill could potentially be a starter for you.
For you can't this week.
Oh, exactly. They're on bye, so you're picking them up for next week.
That tells you how bad the waiver wire is. We're like, go grab the guy that you can't even use this week. But yes, I completely agree. He's got 3 goal-to-go touchdowns this year. Does Taysom Hill? You know he's going to be a factor in the red area for them. And just like look at the Saints right now. Like, play a game. Name the Saints' top 3 wide receivers.
No.
Go for it. And if you can, good for you.
I'll tell you who it is. It's Mason Tipton.
He was inactive last week.
He was inactive. That doesn't mean he wasn't one of the top 3 wide receivers. It's Equinemius St. Brown, who I think is also either on the practice squad. Okay, all right.
Valdez-Scantling.
Thank you.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling. There you go.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who's been really good for them of late. You know, like if that doesn't tickle your fancy, maybe some Cedric Wilson does, right? I mean,
that's right.
We're down to the thinnest of wide receiver rooms right now in New Orleans, with at least 2 more games and maybe the rest of the season of no Chris Olave. So Taysom Hill is going to need to be busy.
Yep.
They are going to use him at the goal line because of the versatility that he brings, not just the fact that he is a very powerful runner, but he takes a direct snap, and you don't know if he's going to run it or throw it or do something else, because he is Taysom Hill. He's a valuable add this week.
Buckle up, Alvin Kamara managers, to get vultured at the goal line for the rest of the season because of Taysom Hill. How about a tight end that does play this week? We can look at Jonnu Smith. Over the last 6 games, he has at least 6 targets in 5 of them. I mean, that's pretty good volume from a tight end spot over that 6-game span. More targets, more receptions, more receiving yards, more touchdowns than any other pass catcher in Miami. That includes Tyreek freaking Hill. Jonnu Smith seems like he's here to stay in this Dolphins offense.
Top 6 tight end since week 5. That's good enough for me. And oh, by the way, since week 5, he's had his bye. So top 6 tight ends with 1 game played than some other tight ends who are notable. So I'm with you, Daniel, on that one.
Yeah, available right now in about 70% of leagues.
Also, throwing the ball to his kid in the stands without knowing he was throwing the ball to his kid in the stands. That's
cool.
Yeah, it's just that's good karma for him going forward.
Right.
That means more fantasy points for him.
Let's talk about Christian Watson, Field, and I want to ask you where you fall on this, because I kind of feel like we have ridden this roller coaster by adding Packers wide receivers off the waiver wire. It now feels like Christian Watson is the next one up in this conversation.
100%, Dan. You said it correctly. But at this point of the season, when you're evaluating options on the waiver wire, you're saying to yourself, all right, who's a player that I have on my roster right now that either is on a bye, or this guy has been on my roster but doesn't represent that much upside? Like Christian Watson is that if he gets hot, would I rather have Christian Watson or this player that's currently on my roster? I would defer to the player that if he gets hot, I would rather have him. So Christian Watson is the streaky player, but he had 150 receiving yards last week on
Best game.
4 catches.
Yep.
But yes, he is a name that has fallen far enough that we can now try to resuscitate his value just a little bit.
Man, it's crazy that we're in that conversation.
I know. It's so funny because remember when Christian Watson was the receiver on the Packers? And I think he still can be. It's just that they have such a carousel of receivers depending on what the game flow is.
Okay, let's talk about a playoff stash brought to you by Wingstop. We're talking about guys that you may want on your bench heading into the playoffs. Field Yates and Stephania Bell, you both were pretty big on Anthony Richardson. You were just, I don't know, like 10 weeks too early. Maybe now we're at the point where we need to start paying attention to Anthony Richardson after what was a really nice Week 11.
So let's piggyback on what we said yesterday. At least, you know, and I felt this way, is that, hey, I was so encouraged by what they did schematically with Anthony Richardson on Sunday. Have I gotten to the point where right away, crank him back up and let's play? No. However, if we see another week of that this week against Daniel's Lions, and when you say see another week of that, what do you mean? Do I mean 28 fantasy points? Well, if I say 28 fantasy points, then heck
course,
yes.
yes.
You're going to be fired up, right? But on top of that, Anthony Richardson, as I mentioned on Monday's show, had 10 rushes for 32 yards and 2 touchdowns. All 10 of those were designed rushes.
Yep.
Okay? Hat tip to our buddy Jacob Gibbs on Twitter, who noted that 10 designed rushes by Anthony Richardson is the most by any quarterback in a game this season, other than Jalen Hurts, who once had 11. So we see guys get to 10, 11, 12, 13 because they scramble, right? And I would be happy if Anthony Richardson scrambles as well. But what I really want is I want them to tap into the potentially unmatched physical traits that Anthony Richardson has as a big-bodied runner. I mean, this is sort of like Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts in terms of stature here. So that to me was so important. I know that this is still a relatively lofty number, but is 8.3, Mike Clay, where are you? Air yards per attempt on Sunday, second lowest in a game this season. So I talked about, like Monday, like making the game simpler for Anthony Richardson.
Yep.
Don't try to build your offense around what you want to do and fit him in. Build your offense around what he does well. I thought that Sunday was a good example of that. I hope that that's the start of a trend for the rest of the season. And as far as playoff stashes are concerned, Week 12, am I going to play him with absolute confidence? Not absolute confidence, but growing confidence. Week 13, they're on a bye. This could be a guy that if he plays well on Sunday, they come out of their bye, maybe in a gotta-have-it situation in Week 14, you would play him.
If I said to you, hey, I have been rolling with C.J. Stroud as a backup quarterback on my 10 or 12 team league roster, are you okay with me dropping C.J. Stroud to go out there and take a shot on Anthony Richardson for a playoff push?
It's not limited to him, by the way, right? Think about Patrick Mahomes right now. When you get to the playoffs, every week is you got to have it or else you're out, right? And if you're the 8th seed or you're the 6th seed in your playoffs and you're playing the best team in the league and you're saying to yourself, I want to find as many guys that have 28-point upside. Who has more 28-point upside this year?
Yeah, that's it.
Again, does Patrick Mahomes have a higher floor than Anthony Richardson? He does. But if the difference between you winning your playoff matchup is getting 28 or not, then I think you find the lottery tickets like Anthony Richardson.
I'm totally with you.
And if you're sitting pretty, it's the time to play defense. You know, go get like 1 or 2 of those players that could hurt you if somebody else picks them up.
Yep.
It could look terrible this week. I want to make that very clear. But the idea, the theory behind an upside player is important right now for the player.
Yeah. That is Playoff Stash brought to you by Wingstop. One last guy I'm going to mention really quickly, Elijah Moore. If you need to grab a wide receiver for this week, he's had at least 8 targets in all of the last 4 games. All right, when we come back, we're going to dive into some good vibes. Stefania's going to break down the segment, let us know what we're talking about, but we're going to bring some positivity into your life heading into Week 12. We'll see you guys in just a minute. Download the ESPN Bet Sportsbook to claim your new player bonus and for a limited time, unlock access for 30 days of ESPN Plus to stream exclusive live sports. Sign up with the promo code FANTASY to get started today. Back here on Fantasy Focus alongside Stephania Bell and Field Yates. My name is Daniel Dopp. We got a new segment for you.
Yeah,
it's
we
Week
do.
12. Stephania Bell, you brought this segment to the table. It's called Good Vibes Only.
Or positive vibes only.
Positive vibes
Same
only,
thing.
good vibes only. They're all the same.
Well, here's the thing. It's just this time of year when those of us who play fantasy football, sometimes you're feeling a little down. If you play in more than one league, you might have some leagues that are doing well, but some leagues that are struggling.
Mike Clay.
And we want you, all you hear about is who's not performing. You hear about who's not available on the waiver wire, all these things that can be discouraging. You have a big loss. People are posting about their sadness. And I was like, you know what? I want people to have something to lift them up week to week. Now, we can find it in football. There's a lot of good things out there in football, little stories. I mean, even the Jonnu Smith one that I mentioned was like an honorable mention for me. We threw the football in the stands, just thinking he was tossing it up to a fan, and there's his little boy ends up getting the football. He didn't know they were sitting there. It's like things like that will just make you smile and maybe feel better about going to the waiver wire and picking up Taysom Hill, who's not playing.
I love that. So we're going to mix a little bit of fantasy football, maybe a little bit of non-football too as well, like just to be able to put some positivity into your life. Stephania, since you brought this segment to the table, I want to let you start first, and then Field and I will jump on after that.
Right, and I will actually start outside the world of football. Sienna DeCambra, I don't know how many of you might have seen this video, a Louisiana Ragin' Cajun female volleyball setter who tore her ACL and was going to miss the entire season. She had announced that on her Instagram, but on senior night, November 15th, 1 point away from an upset of Georgia Southern, her head coach, Christy Gray, wanted to get her into the game, so you saw her come out in her bulky brace. She serves up an ace. One shot, one play. She serves up an ace to win the match. It was match point on her senior night. Thought she wasn't going to step on the court at all because of her torn ACL. Her coach set her up for that. Her teammates come running out. She's bawling. I'm crying. Like, it was just wonderful. What a great way to end her volleyball college career.
That's so awesome. Those are like the sports stories that make you be like, how can you not get romantic about feeling
sports?
That's
the hashtag.
Exactly. You love to be able to see stories like that. I got two of them I'm going to bring to the table if you do not mind. One of them is fantasy related. One of them is not. I'm going to start with Alex Anzalone because I thought this was a really positive message. He unfortunately fractured his forearm in the game last week. He's going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. But he tweeted this out. Thank you to everyone for the well wishes. As an athlete, a lot of times you think, why did this have to happen? But I like to think about all the countless reps where something bad did not happen. I'm beyond blessed. I'll be back in no time, fresh legs and all. I just think that is such an awesome perspective.
In the moment, to have that kind of positive
rather than
thought.
dwell on all the negativity. Oh, I can't believe my team is playing so well. I'm going to miss the next 6 to 8 weeks. It's like, no, you know what? There's a lot of times where something could have happened and it didn't. I just thought that was a really great perspective for someone to take coming out of an injury like that. So shout out to Alex Anzalone. Can't wait to have you back, buddy. From a fantasy perspective, I do want to shout out Jackson Smith and Jigba. You guys might not realize this, but JSN has been absolutely dominant over the last handful of games. 31 targets over the last 3 games. Here's what he's done. 6 for 69, 7 for 180 and 2 touchdowns, 10 for 110 yards. 2 of those 3 games were without DK Metcalf, so he kind of took over that wide receiver 1 role, and you saw it. But it's not just those games. When you look at him this season compared to DK Metcalf, I'm going to give you a couple numbers. DK is averaging 15 points per game. JSN's averaging 14.8. DK is averaging 8.75 targets per game. JSN is averaging 8.7. I mean, they're basically neck and neck there. JSN has the edge in catches in part because of the fact that his targets are not quite as far downfield. You talked about that with Anthony Richardson Field. So you love to be able to see that. This is a guy that I think is very quietly. We talked about him earlier on, maybe not looking the way that we had hoped he would here in this season. I think over the last handful of weeks, he's really started to come into his own. If you have Jackson Smith and Jigba, it more feels like a 1A, 1B as the wide receiver 1 of this Geno Smith-led offense. By the way, if you're going to have someone in an offense, Geno is quarterback 2 in completions, quarterback 3 in attempts, quarterback 4 in passing yards. I mean, this is an offense where you can be excited about it. Just positive vibes all the way around for Jackson Smith.
I thought it was a positive vibe segment, but yet, do you remember who the Seahawks played last week? As usual.
I'm so sorry, Stephania. You're right. That's a faux pas.
Had to do it,
Fantasy faux pas on me.
Had to do it.
That's my bad. I'm just pumped about JSN, unfortunately.
Because I'm already feeling so good about the segment.
That's right. That's right. We're
overlook that.
Everything, all of our spirits are lifted. Field, take us even a little bit higher.
Yeah, all right. So here we got. J.K. Dobbins on Sunday night scores the game-winning touchdown, a 27-yard rushing touchdown late in the game. I'm sorry to our producer, Tyler, who is a Bengals fan, but he's also an Ohio State fan, which is, of course, where J.K. Dobbins rushed for over 2,000 yards during his final college season. Our colleague here at ESPN, Sam Block, known as the Block Spot on Twitter, posted up all the injuries that J.K. Dobbins has overcome. When you see them, it's kind of unfathomable. A broken fibula, a torn ACL, torn LCL, torn meniscus, a torn hamstring, a torn Achilles. He also posits, and I would agree with this, that J.K. Dobbins should be the NFL Comeback Player of the Year. And while we have seen players return from Achilles tears, we haven't seen too many guys return the following year and look better than they were before. And maybe this is just about J.K. Dobbins staying healthy and on the field, but very happy for J.K. Dobbins for this season. It has been really an incredible year, and we've seen a little bit more of Gus Edwards of late since he returned from IR, but J.K. Dobbins has made the most of the opportunities that he has gotten, including that game-sealing play on Sunday night.
That is a laundry list of injuries that would make anybody think, wow, there's no way that guy's still playing in the NFL, let alone playing at the level that he's playing at.
A couple of them were clustered, like that ACL, LCL, meniscus, but that is also what made it so difficult for him to come back. And if you recall, when he was at Baltimore, he struggled when he first came back from that, and then people thought he was washed. He needed more time. He actually had to have a secondary surgery, and then he just started to hit his stride, and he tore his Achilles. So people really wrote him off. And I remember in the preseason him talking about how much he wanted to change the narrative on him. And he was there to prove that he was not done, that he could still thrive as a running back. And even I was concerned about what the volume might be on someone with that history and the mileage that he had sort of from a cumulative perspective over his career. And he has just shattered all of that.
Yeah, all those expectations that came into the season, it's been really great to be able to see J.K. Dobbins do things that I was excited. I was high on him, like potentially doing stuff this year, but not this high.
We just laugh about one
Harbaugh thing.
Harbaugh is the best. Can we just laugh about one thing, though, from Sunday night? So the Chargers get the ball first and goal from, I believe, the 1. I think there was a defensive pass interference penalty in the end zone. They get the ball from the 1st and 1, and, the Harbaugh offense, the Greg Roman offense, somehow they find a way to bring 11 offensive linemen on the field.
Right.
Not actually, but it's like,
Practically.
6 offensive linemen, 2 tight ends, 2 defensive tackles who also play offense. They're in, like, this 1950s offensive formation.
Jumbo set, yeah.
You're like, okay, there's Herbert on the field under center, as you expect him to be, and the running back is Hassan Haskins? 3 straight plays with Hassan Haskins on the field from the goal line, basically. First and goal from the 1, second and goal from the 1, third and goal from the 1, stuffed. And then they're like, oh, let's get J.K. Dobbins in. And he gets into the game and just hurdles over the defense for a touchdown. It was one of those things that, like, if it had been Hassan Haskins who actually scored, the fantasy fallout would have just been, it would have been so typical for fantasy football, right?
I had Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson in my mind all over again, where it was just like backup running back taking those goal line carries, and then you get the guy that you wanted.
This might be even worse, though, because it's like, hey, if you told me from first and goal in the 1, they said, hey, let's just get Gus Edwards in, who's been a great goal line back, right? I'd buy that. I'd be like,
for a long
Gus, that's a
time in
reasonable
Baltimore.
thing to do. Yeah. But Hassan Haskins, you're like, wait, he's on the Chargers, by the way? Like,
Yeah, they do love him. I did, when I was there at training camp, we're talking about vibes, like, they love him. Sort of the unheralded player.
Where did Hassan Haskins play college football and for whom?
He played at Tennessee. West
Maybe
Virginia?
somewhere in the middle of the country.
Yeah,
Maybe somewhere it begins with an M.
Yeah, that would be pretty
Missouri.
Yeah. Close. Michigan. Played for Harbaugh. Then got drafted by Tennessee, by the way.
Oh, I see it. I get it now, guys. See,
no surprise, right? I mean, it would have been so on brand for fantasy football. Like, oh, Hassan Haskins. Our buddy Jake Seeley from The Athletic does the GIF all the time, GIF, whatever, when somebody scores, and it's like a completely random player, and it's like, that helps nobody. So that would have been an all-time that helps nobody.
For what it's worth, we all know that it's GIF, but everyone still says GIF. Like, I feel like that's one of those words.
I just think it's wrong that it's GIF.
I agree with you. In spite of the fact that the
say
creator said that it's GIF, I definitely agree with you that it is GIF.
Whatever.
Also, last thing really quickly, if you're looking for more positive vibes, Field, I believe you're on Blue Sky. Are you on right now in case you're looking for more things from Field Yates on social media?
Every social media platform.
Yeah, me, Field, Liz. We're going to get Stephania on there, a bunch of our fantasy people over on Blue Sky. So if you're looking for another place to be able to follow us and get some fantasy content, you can check us out over there. All right, when we come back, we're going to dive into a little bit more here on Fantasy Focus. We will see you guys in just a moment. You know, the best part about ESPN Fantasy is you guys, the community, the fantasy football diehards, and we want to make sure that we are always answering your questions. Head on over to Twitter and use the hashtag FFNow to drop in your questions. Maybe talk a little bit of smack talk to Mike Clay. Use the hashtag FFNow and tune in this Sunday on ESPN2 at 10 a.m. Eastern to see if you can make your question onto the show. Back here on Fantasy Focus, guys, let's dive into our own Fantasy Focus Show League.
Do we have to?
You know what, Stephania? This week we do, only because I took down the #1 team.
Okay.
Whoa! Hey,
It's like a David and Goliath situation
Let's go.
over here. Sorry, Jackson and Jello, but how you like them apples? This was one of those ones that I was pumped about. Finally had a good week. I have been struggling in this league. So I just want to say this. For me, I was pumped to be able to go out here and do some things against Jackson. If you look at it, if you were watching on the YouTube stream right now, I beat him 135-113.
Wow,
In
decisive
part
victory.
because I started both David Montgomery and Amon-Ra St. Brown. That was good for this week. They
Wow.
overcame what was a tough week from Kareem Hunt. Couldn't believe he only got 6 fantasy points. And Nico Collins. Couldn't believe that. And Rico Dowdle. So I really got carried by my Detroit Lions in more ways than one. But Jackson, unfortunately, just had some difficult times. Terry McLaurin, Jake Ferguson, unfortunately, left early, and Drake London as well. So it was a good win for me as I'm trying to make a final playoff push. Listen, I'm keeping my hopes alive that I can be able to get in there. We obviously know, Stephania, you're already in the playoff hunt for everything.
Yeah,
So-
well, Fields is trying to knock me out, and I'm very disappointed, Field, that you crushed me so badly when I had a chance to be ahead of my Clay. I would have thought you would have just conceded and allowed me to win.
How could
so
you
that
do this,
I could
Field?
be ahead. Now I'm in the tie, 3-way tie in 3rd place with our producers, Mike Clay and me. But Field, like, look.
Oh, you got Juwan Jennings
credit
by
where
Field
credit-
Yates.
I know, which is like adding the insult of all insults to injury. And he had T. Higgins. I mean, welcome back.
Oh, welcome back, T. Higgins.
Like, that's not fair. 29.1 fantasy points when you're coming off a quad injury.
The worst team ever drafted by me has turned it around.
That's right.
Let's go. Okay, we're not quite out of the woods yet. I'm not going to go that far. But currently at 11-11 on the season, we play victory scoring. So I am 500, tied for the 6th best record in the league. And 6 teams do make the playoffs. So this team is coming around. We sort of kept things afloat during all those injuries. And all of a sudden, like, not the worst team alive. So the quarterback is Justin Herbert. That helps, right? Running backs, Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah,
Here's
there
where
he
I'm
is.
pretty
We
deep.
finally got him back.
But
Yeah.
this team is actually weirdly deep at running back. So I've been trying to make a trade, but I don't think anybody will want to make a trade with me between now and the deadline on Wednesday. CMC, Brian Robinson, Rashad White, and Tyrone Tracy. And all of a sudden, the wide receiver room's coming together, too. When T. Higgins is back, he's good. Juwan Jennings, obviously, we know he's just a monster right now. So Juwan Jennings, Zay Flowers.
What are you looking for?
I want a wide receiver.
Be able to do a little business.
Okay, good. Yeah, a wide receiver or, a wide receiver.
really looking for a wide receiver. Is
or a
what
wide
we're looking
receiver.
for.
Ideally, so-
Well, I was just looking at my squad, who was so great for me. I mean, Aaron Jones outperforming a lot of people's expectations this year, and then Derrick Henry, who I've been high on all year. Picked up Bo Nix, who actually was that was a good pickup for me. And but I've got Cooper Kupp. I had a rough week because Aaron Jones was not, I think he's still suffering from that injury. Justin Jefferson had, a ho-hum game by his
fine.
standards.
Yeah.
I'll take him.
Cooper Kupp, he's pretty good.
He's great.
And then Darnell Mooney left early, so
that's
I was
tough.
hurt by that. And I have Deebo Samuel, who did not have a great
Yeah, he did
I
not.
would consider Christian McCaffrey for Justin Jefferson straight up. Just something to talk about, think about. Both players passed
Talk
him by.
about it.
I mean, I don't know. It just,
I got yep.
I'm not sure if I want that. Let me say this.
know.
We got 6 teams that make the playoffs right now. Team 7, right outside the cusp. Field Yates, team 8, right behind him. Me.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I want you to trade him, Justin Jefferson, Stephania.
I would be trading away Christian McCaffrey.
I understand, and Justin Jefferson's going to make you even stronger, won't he?
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
I would
but
lose
he's
Christian
giving up
McCaffrey,
Christian
so I don't know.
McCaffrey.
That would be one that I don't
Ooh.
know the answer.
I think
If you want to make that deal, though, it means that it's a good thing for your fantasy team, which means it's a bad thing for my fantasy.
That's fair. I don't know the answer. Like, I am interested in making that trade, not because I definitively think my team gets better. I also don't know that it gets worse. I don't know. That would be sort of,
There are layers
I'm
here.
intrigued because Christian
Layers
McCaffrey.
here.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, whatever. It's a
We'll
fun.
discuss. Really, really fascinating talk for everybody else. But just we want you guys to know that we are struggle with the same trade.
Oh,
decisions
absolutely.
that you do.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I'd be
I
curious.
do think it's
mean,
interesting
I do
because
think
it's potentially you could arguably the top running back, arguably top wide receiver.
Let's try this. And there's obviously, the context matters, right?
Right,
Like if you
sure.
were super weak at running back, acquiring Christian McCaffrey, or if you're super weak at wide receiver, acquiring Justin Jefferson. In a vacuum, though, YouTube chat, I'd be curious if you guys could chime in.
Who you'd rather have?
Who would you rather have? Christian McCaffrey, you guys could see our rosters on that full screen right there, but not knowing every last detail, Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson. If it's like 90-10 in favor of one or the other, then it might indicate that we are crazy. But I think this might end up being a lot closer to like, I don't know, 55-45.
Yeah, I think so too.
How about this? Just curious, this preseason, I think all of us felt like the two top wide receivers were CeeDee Lamb and Tyreek Hill, right? That was the sort of the prevailing thought coming into the year. And then we felt like there was this top five, right? So it was Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, and Bijan were kind of the five players that were most discussed as the number one overall pick. Then the big question was like, who do you take between Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, and Amon-Ra St. Brown as that third wide receiver off the board and the first in like that non-tier one player? Who are the top three scoring wide receivers right now in the NFL?
Is it those three?
Jamar Chase 1, Amon-Ra St. Brown 2, Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 3. And by the way, it's fairly close. I mean, Chase has the lead. He's played an extra game. But like Amon-Ra is like maybe 15 points ahead of Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
That would be like, fantasy football, you don't get them all right. But like the fact that those three guys were so closely viewed, like it kind of underscores just how there really wasn't a wrong answer there.
No, there were some things coming into the season.
Chase was tough because it was the contract.
I was just going to say, there was the contract that he was talking about that and Joe Burrow's
Burrow,
wrist. So
yeah.
there were two things that were kind of fighting against Jamar Chase, and both of them have turned out to be things that we don't need to worry about here in fantasy football. Turned in an unbelievable season.
I might have to, I'm not sure I can make this trade with Stephania because I was just offered in exchange for Christian McCaffrey, Ray McLeod.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, well, our producer, Tyler, understood that I needed a wide receiver.
Yeah, he gets it. He gets it.
I was like,
he gets it.
Of course, yes.
Really quickly.
I had to stop for a second though because Field was really considering that. And I'm like,
Yeah, he's a thespian at heart. Obviously, you've seen all of his impressions. We know that he could do the stage and screen, Stephania.
Part of me is like, that league is one where, all the leagues bring me joy, but some bring more consternation than they do excitement. And that would be one, like the CMC Jefferson one. I just think it would be a fascinating fantasy trade that, like,
just to see how it
be kind of
plays out
interesting.
for
Yeah,
the
I mean,
rest
it
of the year.
might end up costing me a league title, but I don't know. Part of me is like,
I don't know. I mean, listen, Justin Jefferson can be pretty spectacular in his own right.
yeah, and
You
CMC
need
could be
wide
the best
receiver.
receiver the rest of the way. He's
go with T. Higgins. You got T. Higgins. You've got Jawan. I mean, why do you think you need a wide receiver? By the way.
Well, because this week my margins are narrow, right? I'm 11-11, so I don't have like a lot of time on my side, and I don't have Zay Flowers in week 14. He's up and down. I don't have T. Higgins this week, so I'm sort of like I need to win every matchup basically to get into the playoffs. I don't know.
I think I'm ready to do this trade.
Okay, let's talk offline. For a second here. Okay, 58.
So it's like what we said.
So, yeah,
it's
so
close.
like that's
I
within
think
the
also
margin for
the
error.
appeal, right? If you look at it in a vacuum, Justin Jefferson upside for like one of these huge wide receiver days.
Sure, yeah.
Christian McCaffrey's probably not going to hit that, but is Christian McCaffrey going to get me double-digit fantasy points every single week? I believe so.
Christian McCaffrey
Except for
might
week
hit
17,
47
probably,
points too, right? Like it's Christian McCaffrey.
He
He's
could,
awesome, yeah.
but he is going. His floor is probably going to be pretty solid amongst running backs where the floor is not typically solid.
Totally agree. Yeah.
As long as this trade helps either of you beat Mike Clay, who, for the record, just wiped the floor, unfortunately, with our buddy JB Brubaker. I love JB and the guitarist in the band August Burns Red. We need anybody to take Mike
if I'm
down.
playing Mike next, then we have to make this trade.
Yeah, let's see.
Let's really quickly look at
This is how it works, people. You look at what is the.
Oh, he's playing Trophy Smack, who's got a behemoth team. Who's
Trophy
in first
Smack
place
is in
now.
first place right now. Yeah, shout out to Trophy Smack because they are crushing it. All right. We're going to throw up the standings one more time if you want to look at them in case you are watching this. Trophy Smack is in first. Our buddy Jackson Agello is in second. And then Tyler, our producer, is in third. Apparently, he should be down here, and we should be up in the control room. Obviously, Tyler knows what's going on.
Does, yeah.
Stephania, you're in fourth. Miller Lite Mike is in fifth. And Griffey Cakes, our cousin Griffey, that final playoff spot in sixth. And then Field and I are on the outside looking in for that seventh and eighth spot, trying to get in that last playoff spot as we get closer to the
plays
playoffs.
Griffey Cakes in week 13. What can we do to boost Griffey Cakes?
Yeah, we got to make some deals here. That's not,
FCMC.
for what it's worth, this is not collusion. It's just trying to make Mike Clay lose.
It's
Different. It's just different. Yeah. All right, when we come back, we're going to close things out here on Fantasy Focus. Stick around. ESPN Bet. Download the ESPN Bet Sportsbook to claim your new player bonus, and for a limited time, unlock access to 30 days of ESPN Plus to stream exclusive live sports. Sign up with the promo code FANTASY in order to get started today. All right, back here on Fantasy Focus, Field Yates, Stephania Bell. My name is Daniel Dopp, closing out what has been a very fun Tuesday waiver wire show. One thing I want to add that we did not dive into as far as waivers, this might be the time of year where you start looking at defenses for your playoff roster. I think a defense that you should definitely consider is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the schedule that they have coming up, for what it is worth.
Did you know that the Bucs, who face the Giants on Sunday, are going to be facing off against Tommy DeVito? Did you know that Tommy Cutlets last year had 5 games with at least 5 sacks taken? He was on an historic pace last year.
I remember that.
The pocket presence is not a massive strength of his game. So the Bucs getting a little bit healthier coming out of their bye, at least on offense.
Yep.
And defense, too. You know, Vita Vea has been banged up this year a little bit. So the Bucs could be an intriguing defense.
Next 3 games, Giants, Panthers, Raiders.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is we have all these teams. We've got the 6 teams on a bye this week. But then, you go into Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
And you've got 3 games on Thursday: Bears, Lions, Giants, Cowboys, Dolphins, Packers. And then on Friday, Raiders, Chiefs. So that means all those teams have a relatively short week.
Wait a minute.
Off.
So you're telling me we're going to have football Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Friday,
and
Sunday again? Oh, that's a week of my life right there. I'm in 2 weeks like that.
And Sunday and Monday.
Yes. Yeah. Those are positive vibes only for sure.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yes.
That's
So just, that when you're talking about rest starts to matter, take a look at who all has those short weeks.
Yeah, we are going to have a very big rankings show tomorrow with Mike Clay back joining us. It's going to be interesting to see how these rankings fall in Week 12 with 6 teams on a bye. Especially with all the guys that are going to be out, it feels like we're going to have a lot of guys that may have not normally been inside the top 20 or 25, all of a sudden are up there because of all the guys out.
By the way, congratulations to Mike Clay. He's going to be on the show for the first time since
in like a
I was
week.
going to say at least Halloween.
It's crazy.
I think he remembers how to do it.
No, definitely not. No way.
No way.
I still get a ton of questions from people like, are you guys really mean to Mike because you don't like him? It's like, no, Mike Clay is
We
one
had
of
a
our best
positive
friends.
vibe show today, though, so that was even more reason to be celebrating.
Yeah.
It's just the 3 of us.
It's going to be exactly, Stephania. Exactly. We did the positive vibes on a non-Mike day for a reason, Stephania Bell. Of course we did. All right, that's going to do it for us over here at Fantasy Focus. We love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Today's show was presented by our buddies over at Wingstop. Check them out and come back tomorrow for a Week 12 rankings show. Me, Field, and Mike Clay diving into all the rankings that you need to know for Week 12. Don't forget to love each other, be kind to yourself, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.